and making sure that Paste Remembers Layers is off, I click on Paste Remembers Layers to turn off that checkbox. Now, if I go back to the black pattern layer and then paste in place, which is Command-Shift-V, now that guide has been pasted as a rectangle right at the top of the black pattern layer. Now I want to release that guide to be an object right at the top. So I go to the guide menu and then click on Release Guides, which is Option Command 5. Great. So now I have a rectangle right at the top of the black pattern. So it doesn't matter what stroke or fill is applied to this rectangle, because what I'm doing is using that to define the pattern size. So the first thing I want to do is Option click on the black pattern layer, and that will select all of the items, making sure that the rectangle is right up at the top. We did the paste in place so on that layer, so that's just going to put that rectangle on the top, and that's what we want for the shape that's going to define the pattern. Now go to the Object menu and then select from the Pattern submenu, Make. Now we've switched into the pattern mode. As you can see, Adobe Illustrator has given us a notification that the new pattern has been added to the swatches panel over here. So you can see a little icon over here added to the end of our available colors in the swatches panel. So any changes made while in pattern editing mode will be applied to the swatch upon exit. Okay. So if we use the command minus function, we can zoom out and see what's happening. So the pattern is not being based on the top object. So we might need to change that, but there might be another way to go about this. So I'm going to type in parallelogram, parallelograms pattern, to name our pattern. There's a number of options for creating your patterns. So we want to actually use the grid option here. Then maybe we want to size the tile to the artwork or set an actual width and height. So I'm going to change this to 100 points by 100 points. Great. So it's a little bit off right now. The objects aren't aligning to the square that I've created. So I might need to do some adjustments. So to do that, I'm going to Command A, and that will choose all of my objects. And I'm going to click and then drag the square until it aligns with the 100 point by 100 point width and height selected for the pattern. So I might want to make sure that these are precisely aligned with the artboard. Looks like it's a little bit off. Huh. Okay, I'm not sure if that's achieving what I was hoping for. And take a closer look. Right, that's a bit off. I see. So we've moved things. I want to align it with that object. I'm going to have some issues. So maybe I will switch to the top left reference point and then make sure I've got exact numbers here, 225 for the x coordinate and 200 for the y coordinate. Let's see what happens then. All seems a little bit off. Maybe what I should have done is actually used a mask. Well, why don't we try that? I'm going to cancel out of here for now, and then go back to the artwork. So if I option click now, and then go to the object menu, and select clipping mask, and then make, which is Command 7. So now I've got a pattern that is exactly the 100 point by 100 point square. So now that's created a clipping group. If I now go to the object menu and select pattern make, the new pattern has been added to the swatches panel. Okay, but I want the width and height to be sized to size the tile to the art. So click on size tile to the art. Great. That's what we wanted. Name the pattern parallelograms and then enter. That looks like exactly what we want. So I'm going to click on done. And now we have exited the pattern editing mode. And we can see that we are back Command 0 in the middle of our artboard looking at the black pattern layer. So now we can see the pattern here, and I can turn off this black pattern layer. So I've clicked on this little icon to close the layer, and then click on the eye icon to toggle the visibility. So using the black motif layer, I'm going to click on that. I'm going to create another box here, a rectangle, using the rectangle tool. And I will click in the top left corner of the artboard and type in 600, which is the full width, and then half the height, so 300. Tab, and then OK. So now, if I go to the fill, the swatch palette and click on fill, I have a parallelograms pattern that's been added to the palette. If I click on that, it will fill that layer with the pattern that I've just created. That's great. So I can use the direct selection tool and making sure, option clicking on the object, I can option click and drag down to the bottom corner, and snap to point, and let go. So now I've created two boxes. One's going to be for the top, one's going to be for the bottom. So I'm just going to copy that box to the color motif layer. So you click on the small icon, click and drag up to the color motif layer, and now that rectangle is on the color motif layer. So I can make sure by turning on and off the visibility, and that's exactly where I want it. All right, so why don't we turn off the color motif and the black motif for now, and then I can go back to the black pattern and turn that on again. Now we're going to copy that pattern that we've created and move it to the color pattern. So I can option click on the black pattern layer, and then using the option key, click and then drag, and that's going to copy all of those objects onto the color pattern layer. So if I turn off the black pattern layer now, I can see all of those objects are in the clipping path inside of this clipping group. So I can go into this object now with the direct selection tool and start selecting objects, or not. So this is something new for the most recent versions of Illustrator. If I want to directly affect the objects in a clipping path or a clipping mask, I might want to release the contents or edit the contents. So I'll click on Edit the Contents. So now I can individually select these items. So these two objects are part of the same thing. I'm going to change that to maybe a green. Now these two objects also will be part of the same part of the pattern, so I'm going to select those two objects and then change that to kind of an orangey red, so maybe that color. This parallelogram, I'm going to make it more of an orangey yellow. And then the last object will be a sort of teal green. So maybe something like this color. Looks good. All right, so there we have it. Our color pattern. Now we just option click on that layer and the entire pattern is now selected. Go to the object menu and let's create a pattern again. Pattern, make. So we created a new pattern that has been added to the swatches panel. Okay. This time we can call this color parallelograms. Grid is the tile type option that we want, but the width should be 100 by 100. If we size tile to art, that will do the trick, and that's exactly what we want. So at that point, we can say done. The pattern has been created and has been added to the swatches palette. So now if I click on color palette to close it and then toggle the visibility of that layer, I can turn on the color motif layer, select that object with an option click using the direct selection tool. Now click on the swatch for the color parallelograms, and we've changed the color. Turn on the visibility for the black motif layer, and that essentially completes our project for Artboard 1.